Welcome to another installment of Leadership Insights. I am very excited to be speaking with my colleague from the Møller Institute, Mike Griffiths. Hi, Mike.
Hi, Portia. Great to see you. How are you doing?
Great to see you again. Mike is Managing Director of Consulting Skill Limited and a Fellow of the Institute of Coaching at Harvard Medical School. And so he's here today to talk to us about his leadership insights. And Mike, you've coached or trained a head-spinning number of people, over 50,000 people, I think. So I'm really keen to hear your perspective. Obviously, we're in the midst of a pandemic. What's changed from your perspective, and what are the implications for that for leadership?
Thanks, Portia. Well, first of all, I think our work patterns have changed irrevocably. We hear from employees that they're not going back. Twitter has made that clear in their announcements. A lot of other organizations will follow. And leaders are saying, well, I can't go back to leading the way I was, but I'm not entirely sure what new looks like now.
Yeah.
And I think the first real fundamental focus around leadership is around humanity, because I think this working from home has been a good thing in so many ways. It's not just been eco-friendly, it's been the mess that we have. You can see it behind me now. You're moving from a room to room, you're juggling, you've got kids and pets in the background, and it brings out more of our humanity. And I think that's so important, because when leaders show their true selves, and I think that's been actually a trend over social media for many years now, we want to see the rough and ready and the scrappiness and the fact that we're improvising through life. When our leaders do that and show their true selves, I think that liberates us all to do the same, and that unquestionably reduces stress. So one aspect, I think, of how this pandemic as a good thing has happened, tragic though it is in so many other ways, is it's brought out more of our humanity at work. I think another area really has been, it's thrown up the question, what really is the purpose of business? And we talk about the bottom line a lot. And of course, leaders have made a lot of strides in so many other areas, but really the focus of business now has to be enhancing well-being at a much broader level. And I mean, health and happiness and prosperity. We know from Kaiser Family Foundation that 50% of Americans now feel that their mental health has been significantly affected over the last few months. And we look at health and well-being in terms of life satisfaction, meaning and purpose in life, the ability to manage stress. These things we've known are important, but it's brought them into sharp relief with the dramatic changes that are going on. And as a leader, then I think we have to be much more aware. Where leadership really starts is that as a leader, you believe that you can take care of more than yourself. That you see the potential not just in yourself, but in others. You see the potential in life, and you're trying to harness the ambitions and the aspirations of people towards a greater cause. And surely that greater cause has to be very much focused around human well-being. But we also see leaders who have very high levels of ambition and where their ego gets in the way. So, I've seen over and over again, leaders with high ambition are very often the least equipped to be leaders because there's too much fixation on their own well-being. And so this ability, as Ray Dalio says, organizational transformation starts at personal transformation. 80% of leadership I have seen, and 80% of strategy really is psychology of the leader. Then how do we own our own well-being and the well-being of others? And so how do we exemplify humanity? How do we really foster well-being as part of our culture? I think these will be two of the pillars that are going to create a competitive advantage in the next few years.
And that's a really interesting point. And I think we all know, both through our interactions with others during this pandemic, but also our own personal experiences of good days and bad days when it feels like, is this ever going to end? And it feels quite oppressive. What can leaders do around this to foster more of the well-being?
Well, I think it starts with a state of mind. When we look at the neuroscience, what we see here is that leaders have a certain state of mind that then defines their own self-narrative. And what I mean by a self-narrative is the story that you think about yourself, what you can do yourself, and what's possible for the organization, what's possible for your teams, what's possible in life. And that, depending on that story, that sets the lid, or lifts the lid on the strategies that you can adopt. But this is very interesting because historically we've kind of looked at leaders to develop the strategy first, and then that sets the frame about what we can and can't do and what's possible. And then we've hoped that people have the right state of mind to really take this forward. Well, what we're seeing now is that the leader's state of mind affects the story of everybody, and particularly around engagement. And we've got to spend a bit of time on engagement because right now it's falling through the floor. You know, leaders on the one hand, they put out pulse surveys, they do exit interviews, and they do entry interviews. They have hackathons, you know, these open forum, open door policies. And still we know 17% of people say only 70% are fully engaged. 34% feel they're just compliant at work. 50% say their boss is draconian and they want to leave. 89% of people feel that they don't have a voice. 90% say they can't take risk. So this is a real concern, despite all the efforts, all the strategies that leaders are putting forward. And at the same time, leaders are saying, well, I want more problem solving. I want better problem solving. So in the World Economic Forum CEO survey in 2015, the number one skill that leaders wanted more of, that they thought would need to be most prevalent across all jobs, was complex problem solving. And when you dug into that, what you saw was it was the ability to understand and respond to disruptive scenarios, like the one we're having right now. And in 2020, it's just been the same. But then you see a few months ago, Oxford Economics coming up with a bit of research that said, no, we need better social skills. We need more empathy, more emotional intelligence, more teaming. So leaders kind of want it all. At the same time, trust is declining for leaders and engagement's declining for leaders. So we're really at this crossroads. And I think historically, folks like ourselves, Portia, we kind of have to go back to, well, what leadership development have we introduced to leaders for them to be able to take on board? And, you know, Leadership 1.0 was sort of looking at great leaders, codifying what they did and who they, you know, the kind of the behaviors and traits they had. And then we would introduce this and hopefully some model that wasn't simplistic, but was same time fairly simple, and say to leaders, okay, try this. And then that evolved to sort of Leadership 2.0, where we said, no, you've got to be more flexible and in the moment and adaptive. And so here are different styles you can adopt. And now we're sort of 3.0 is about communities with purpose and teams of teams and the wider ecosystem. And I think now we're kind of moving to a Leadership 4.0, which is much more around well-being. And how do we foster a state of mind? And therefore, what does the state of mind need to be of that leader? And so if I take a look at some fantastic research from February of this year from Erasmus, MIT, and Oxford, what they came up with was across 1,800 sales professionals, they looked at their performance. And what they worked out was that the happiest were better at problem solving, and were better at social skills, and had more intrinsic motivation. In other words, they had more engagement. Not only that, they performed at 18 to 20% higher. They actually sold 18 to 24% more. And sales professionals are such a great population to look at because, of course, there's a very clear number at the end of it. So leaders are saying, well,
you know, clear, aren't they? Yeah,
absolutely, yeah. Leaders are saying, well, hang on a second. So I want more problem solving, and I want better social skills, and I want better engagement. Are you telling me that if I can work on people's happiness, then problem solving and social skills and engagement follow? And that's absolutely, this kind of sounds intuitively obvious, except this is the first time that academics have established a irrefutable causal link between well-being, happiness, and high performance. And so the question then comes up, well, for leaders, well, what do I need to do to help people and create a happy environment for people? And we know that there are these three fundamentals around more autonomy, you know, giving people a voice where they feel they really matter, giving people gratification on the terms that the employee really values, and mastery, creating systems and apprenticeships where people can take risks in psychologically safe environments so that they can really learn and grow, but are not bashed on the head if they screw something up. That's terribly important. So autonomy and mastery and gratification, that's very important. But then if we go back to leaders' state of mind, I think there are four that just keep coming up over and over again. And these are ways of being. These are, number one, the degree to which a leader contributes and is inclusive. Are they really serious? Are they really committed about pulling together the collective aspirations and harnessing the talents of their people? How much do they show that and exemplify it? That's number one.
Yeah, absolutely, and role model it, isn't it? Be the change you
Absolutely.
want to see in
Be the
others.
change.
Absolutely, yeah.
And that's so important, Portia. I think be the change you want to see. It starts with that way of being. And then secondly, that level of agency. Do you consider yourself the source of the change? Whatever happens in life, those events we can't predict, are you willing to make the difference? And then thirdly, your degree of authenticity. Are you holding yourself true to who you say you are? And the compounding effects of consistency around that over time. It's the consistency that followers really need. And then lastly, a level of integrity about being true to your word and true to your values all the way through. So this is, I think, a very interesting time in terms of our studies. It's why we have the Explorer Mindset Leadership Program, which is, it's deliberately called the Explorer Mindset because we are looking at what is the state of mind, the way of being, and the notion of bringing more integrity, authenticity, contribution, agency to your leading in the moment. Not leadership, which is more like balance. You can describe it, but you can't get much access to it. It's about leading in the moment and the link that really has to high performance.
Yeah, and I think that's a great point, Mike, because I think one of the things that really surprised me and continues to surprise me is so often you can come across leaders that are very high up in the hierarchy, but they don't necessarily feel like leaders. So just because they have a position of leadership doesn't mean that they feel they have that sense of agency. So I don't make the decisions around here. It's made somewhere else. I've got no power. And they can honestly, genuinely feel like that. And so I think that point about it doesn't matter whether you're in a position of leadership. It's about leading in the moment. And in a moment, you can have a tremendous impact. For example, through, even if you're not the leader, creating psychological safety in that moment, acknowledging what's been said that's good, to create that positive sense in the working climate. Yeah, I think it's a really good point.
I think it's beautifully said, Portia. If I may build on that, I think more than ever before we need tiers of leaders. We need that agency. We need people feeling empowered that they can adopt a strategy, and that starts with their state of mind. If their state of mind, if we have a positive well-being and a positive state of mind across these four, then that will affect what I think is possible and will enable me to create and own a strategy in a way that I never could before. So I absolutely agree.
Yeah, it's really interesting. And so what about overrated? What leadership traits, in your view, are sort of overrated in the current climate, or in the future, do you think will be?
Well, I think we have to take a really close look at ego. So no one would say ego is sort of overrated, but I actually, if my arm kept doing this as we were talking, you might say to me, hey, Mike, you kind of ought to take a look at that. But when people's egos do that, we kind of don't think anything of it. And people's egos are yo-yoing up and down the whole time. Sometimes they're high and people feel superior and they're judging others. Sometimes they're low and they have, they kind of feel victimized by things. And we see this a lot in leaders across the board now. I think the ability to modulate ego is incredibly important versus high ego. We often associate leaders with high ego. I think that's primitive. I think that we have to look at, there are times when you have to set direction, own a vision, call it, make tough decisions where your ego inevitably has to be higher. Then at other times when you're being vulnerable and you need to draw people in and you need humility. There are things clearly that one doesn't know. So that ability to adjust your ego to what's required I think is something we really have to take a look at, and we have to move away from, as we've said for many years, this sort of high ego, supremely confident leader that frankly masks often an inability to genuinely lead.
Yeah, absolutely. And in one sense, I think the current climate provides a perfect permission to be like
Yes.
that, because no one knows the future now. Nobody does. The best scientists in the world don't know what's going to happen in the next 6 months. Organizational leaders, political leaders, no one knows. So one sense that provides permission, I guess, for leaders to be a little bit humble and say, I don't know, but this is my best guess, and this is what I suggest in terms of how we go forward. So
Yes, and encourage that leadership from others and to listen. I think that's incredibly important. One executive coach said to me when my son was very ill, he said, what do you think your role is as a father? And I said, well, it's obviously to find ways of helping heal my son. And the coach said, no, I think that's your son's role with you. You need to sit at his feet and you need to start listening to him. And that was some of the best advice I think I ever had as a father, to really listen and to develop some more humility.
Wow. Yes, well, that's a tough question from an executive coach. Kudos. Wow.
Yes, he didn't mess about. Yeah.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
So tell me, in terms of leaders that you admire, anyone sort of stand out for you at the moment?
Well, I would have to say that a leader I've found to be very, very inspiring has been Swami Baba Ramdev in India. So not many people in the West have heard of Swami Baba Ramdev, but he is a leader of an organization called Patanjali. His very close colleague and friend is the person who runs a lot of the business on a day-to-day basis. It's a fast-moving consumer goods business. It is solely producing goods in India. And when I met him, he just said that all of life is something that we can look through the lens of business. We are always creating value, exchanging value. So prosperity in its broadest sense is very important, but it's prosperity for the greater good of humanity. So I said, well, so what are your working practices? And he said, well, I sleep on the floor. I don't have a bed because I want to stay close to the people that I serve. And so for him, taking care of his community was incredibly important. I'm not saying we all have to now, kind of get out of our beds and sleep on a hard wooden floor, but his willingness to do what it took to stay close to his people and to give so much to the community, I think was truly inspiring. He has one luxury item, which is a car, so he can drive around to meet people in India. But he was a very humbling leader. I think we can all learn a lot from him.
Yeah, that's fascinating. And okay, yeah, that's a very really interesting example. And so any other sort of, before we sort of sign off, final thoughts on leadership or takeaways that you want to share with people?
Well, I would think, to sum up, we have to take a really close look at the degree to which we really exemplify our humanity, and the degree to which we really are serious about well-being beyond just the traditional definition of prosperity. And for us to take a look and ask those questions, to what degree am I being somebody who really contributes and includes others? Just as a mother and father are to a family, can you be a mother and father to your community or your society and genuinely include them? What does that take? What does that look like? And the degree to which you really see yourself as the source of change and encourage that in others, and have that level of integrity, which of course none of us have completely. And authenticity, can we be authentic about our own inauthenticity? I think is very challenging. So these are challenging questions, and they're not for the faint of heart, but we know now that they make a profound difference to well-being and ultimately the performance in a business. So that's what I would say was really the the line of sight between one's state of mind and ultimately the performance in a business.
Yeah, no, thank you, Mike. That I hope leaders, you've certainly sparked some reflective questions for me as a leader. So I hope others, I'm sure others will be definitely inspired to reflect on some of these things as well. So thank you very much for your contribution and your thoughts. It's fascinating. And everyone tune in next week. We've got another Leadership Insights next week from the Møller Institute, and we look forward to seeing you then.